Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you some of the best college football news, predictions, and analysis. Our final New Year's Day bowl game brings us a top 10 showdown in New Orleans as number 5 Georgia takes on number 7 Baylor in the Sugar Bowl. And right off the bat, one of the biggest storylines to monitor in this one is that Georgia finds themselves in a very familiar position. Just last year, back in 2018, the Bulldogs were one win away in the SEC championship game from making the college football playoff. Georgia lost that game, fell down to the Sugar Bowl, where they lost to Texas 28-21 in a game that was not nearly as close as the score indicated. And for the entire offseason, and certainly right after that game, many people cited motivation as a big reason why Georgia fell to the Longhorns in that Sugar Bowl. Fast forward to 2019, we're in the exact same spot. Georgia was just one win away in the SEC championship game from making the college football playoff. But the Bulldogs lost to LSU, and they find themselves once again back in the Sugar Bowl. Motivation, is it going to be there for Georgia? And will it be there without a handful of starters? A list that just goes on and on and on. At the time of this filming, we're going to announce these players that we know for a fact will be out. There could very well be more that will not be on the field for Georgia as they take on a very solid and surprising Baylor squad. The Bulldogs, they're going to be depleted, especially up front, losing Andrew Thomas and Isaiah Wilson along the offensive line. Both those players preparing for the 2020 NFL Draft. Not a fan of that. We are not a fan of players skipping out on bowl games. But we do wish them the best of luck in their future in the NFL. But right there, you're missing two huge pieces on your offensive line, and you're missing Ben Cleveland as well. Not nearly as big as Andrew Thomas or Isaiah Wilson, but another offensive lineman that the Bulldogs will not have in this game. Georgia will also be without Brian Herrien, the second leading rusher on the team, behind DeAndre Swift, who is questionable for this game. Right now, as we are filming this, we don't know if DeAndre Swift will play or not. He played extremely sparingly in the SEC title game, only getting a handful of touches. He might not be 100%. He might not play at all. That's something that you do want to monitor. Georgia's going to be without their safety, J.R. Reed, a first-team All-American, will not be playing in this Sugar Bowl, and neither will Tyler Clark along the defensive line. So right there, you've got huge players on both sides of the ball for Georgia that aren't going to be suiting up in this Sugar Bowl. Pair that with some lack of motivation, and it might make for a very interesting game to kick off 2020. Well, fast forward to the offense here. We're going to talk about Baylor. No one expected Baylor to be in this position right now. No one expected Baylor to be number 7 in the country, playing in the Sugar Bowl, and really being one win away against Oklahoma from being in the college football playoff. But the Bears are averaging 35.2 points per game, led by Charlie Brewer, one of the best quarterbacks in the entire Big 12, over 2,900 passing yards this season, 20 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and a major part of his success is that he's got one of the better wide receivers in the Big 12, Denzel Mims. 61 receptions, 945 yards, and 11 touchdowns. He's extremely elusive, and he's extremely tough to stop for any opposing defense. So I'm curious to see how Georgia plans to stop Denzel Mims, obviously Charlie Brewer's favorite target. And luckily, Brewer going to be back and healthy for this game after getting knocked out of that Big 12 championship game against Oklahoma. Baylor also, they pass a lot with Charlie Brewer. That's their bread and butter. That's something that is a major reason to Baylor's success. But they're also averaging 174.5 rushing yards per game, led by John Lovett, who's averaging 6.4 yards per carry. So this Baylor team has some balance and can attack you from both sides offensively. For Georgia, when you look at them, despite some struggles they've had offensively, especially about midway through the season, kind of all starting with that South Carolina loss, they still average 31.2 points per game. And then, of course, they are led by Jake Fromm, one of the best quarterbacks, not just in the SEC, but in the nation, who may be playing in his final game as a Georgia Bulldog. He's only a junior, but it could be his last game, depending on what happens in the Sugar Bowl. Can he improve that draft stock any after throwing for over 2,600 yards, 22 touchdowns, and just 5 interceptions this season? We know that one of his top wide receivers in Lawrence Cager is going to be out for this game. I mean, we knew that before the Sugar Bowl was even announced. He got hurt before the end of the regular season. He does have George Pickens, leading wide receiver, 552 yards and 7 touchdowns. But as we mentioned earlier, the biggest thing to monitor for Georgia's offense is, yes, obviously they're going to be much weaker up front, but will DeAndre Swift play? And if he plays, will he be 100%? Will he be 100%? A guy that hardly got any production going against LSU in the SEC title game. Wasn't really involved that much anyways. Will he be 100%? And if he is, or even if he just plays, can he get anything going against a depleted offensive line that might have their hands full against the best defense in the entire Big 12? Yes, the Baylor Bears had the best defense in the Big 12 and ranked 8th in the nation in sacks. 43 sacks this season for the Baylor Bears, and they are led by none other than James Lynch, the Big 12 leader in sacks this season with 12.5. So 12.5 of the 43 sacks from Baylor came from James Lynch, and he was also the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. We'll just tack that on to the list of amazing things that James Lynch has done this season for the Bears. This is a Baylor team allowing just an average of 19.3 points per game, but the one number I have circled that could be a difference maker is that Baylor is allowing 214.8 passing yards per game. So, quite frankly, if I'm going to be honest, if I'm Baylor, I'm not too worried about Georgia's rushing game in this one. DeAndre Swift may or may not play. If he does, he might not be 100%. Brian Herrien not going to be playing in this game anyways, so I'm not too worried about that, especially with a depleted offensive line. I think Baylor would be able to shut down the run fairly quickly and get some pressure to Jake Fromm. But I am concerned because Jake Fromm is not a bad quarterback. Despite all the crap that he's given, he's not a bad quarterback, and my secondary for Baylor, not that good. So that's the biggest number you want to watch. If Baylor can cut down that number a little bit, create some pressure on Jake Fromm, force a few turnovers, that's going to be a huge boost for Baylor in trying to win what I still believe, despite all the depletions, despite all the players sitting out, will be a close Sugar Bowl. For Georgia, they are once again one of the better defenses in the entire SEC, allowing just 12.5 points per game. They're number 2 in the nation when it comes to scoring defense, just 12.5 points per game. And they allow just 75.7 rushing yards per game. So they're well up there in the top 10 when it comes to rushing defense. Utah only allowing about 70 rushing yards per game, and they're ranked number 1. But can Georgia do it defensively across the board? Baylor might not get as much going on the ground, but that's okay because Charlie Brewer has played so well through the air. This passing game, regardless of who's been in at quarterback, go back and watch that Big 12 championship game. Baylor ended up playing 3 quarterbacks in that game. They all played just fine, despite falling short in overtime. But Baylor playing so well against the pass, will they be able to do it? And will Georgia be able to stop it without J.R. Reed, that All-American safety we mentioned, and then, of course, Tyler Clark along the defensive line? Those are big losses, guys. Those are big losses that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, and a lot of people might just be brushing it off, saying, happens all the time. People sit out bowl games all the time, and business is still taken care of. It's not going to be that big a deal. That may be true, but most of the time, those are the only players sitting out. You're not missing almost 10 players for Georgia that are going to be sitting out in this game. So having all that being said, you look at the offensive side of the ball, you look at the defensive side of the ball, you look at the concerns for both teams coming into this one. Obviously, I think there are more for Georgia. Who's going to win this Sugar Bowl down in New Orleans? Who's going to kick off their new year, 2020, with a win? Who's going to get it? We look at Baylor here. They're a team that has not won a New Year's Six caliber bowl game since 1979. They're a team that's making their first Sugar Bowl appearance since 1957. And I am here to say that in their first Sugar Bowl since 1957, they will win it. And they will win their first New Year's Six bowl game since 1979. And a lot of people are going to bash me in the comments. I know Salty Dog's going to comment, but he's salty just about everything when I don't pick Georgia. And I will tell you what, my friends, my initial pick was the Bulldogs. My initial pick was for Georgia to go in there and win this game. Not handily, but win it over Baylor. And they still could. Honestly, I'd love nothing more for them to go and prove me wrong. But you look at how many players are sitting out this game for Georgia. And I don't care what Kirby Smart says. I don't care what the player says. These guys are not going to be pumped for it. I know maybe they want to go out there and redeem themselves after what happened in last year's Sugar Bowl to Texas. But you really do question the motivation. There's nothing for Georgia to play for here. They didn't make the college football playoff. They didn't win the SEC, but they're playing a Baylor team that has tons of motivation. They're playing a Baylor team that has no player bailing on them for this game, whether it's due to the NFL draft, whether it's due to injury, whether it's due to academic reasons. There is not a Baylor player, to my knowledge, that is going to be out of this game. And if they are, they're not huge and key players like the ones they are for Georgia. So after a lot of consideration, all things considered, we're rolling with the Bears to pull off the upset down in New Orleans. They're going to hand Georgia their second straight New Year's Six Bowl loss, their second straight Sugar Bowl loss. Many people will cite motivation, and for the first time, I will agree with them. Georgia's not motivated. Baylor is, and that's going to play a huge role in this one, along with the players not playing. And Baylor kicks off their new year, kicks off 2020 with a New Year's Six Bowl win, their first since 1979, and they clinch. In their third year under Matt Rule, just their third, they clinched the first 12-win season in school history. First 12-win season in school history, and that truly is unbelievable considering just a few years ago, in Matt Rule's first year, the Bears were sitting at 1-11. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here on YouTube. Make sure to check out everything we have for you in the description below. We've got the spread pick for this Sugar Bowl, and it's one that you certainly don't want to miss out on. So we've got the spread pick for this Sugar Bowl and every other college football bowl game over at thegridironexpert.com. We've got exclusive college football content and offers that you do not want to miss, so check it all out in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.